A very warm welcome to a new episode of Melt. I'm Ritvika Gupta shooting from home. Despite the unprecedented global travel restrictions, tourism boards have uncovered ways to stay top of mind using digital to transcend borders and appeal to consumers amid the pandemic. One such example is the Singapore Tourism Board that's been continuously running campaigns to keep Indian audiences engaged, with the latest being a content tie-up featuring the popular Indian cartoon character Chhota Bheem. Titled Chhota Bheem Adventures in Singapore, the 7-part series shows the cartoon character traveling to prominent attractions in Singapore and engaging in fun activities with his friends. To know more, we will be in conversation today with GB Srithar, Regional Director, India, Middle East and South Asia, Singapore Tourism Board. Let's get ready to melt with GB Srithar. Hello, Mr. Srithar. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Ritvika. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Over the last 1.5 years, the travel industry has changed drastically. The meaning of tourism and travel, have changed, and it's been a challenging time for businesses in the travel sector. Despite that, the Singapore Tourism Board has been doing a lot as far as marketing is concerned, and STB India in particular has been doing a lot for the Indian market. So recently, what caught my eye was the Chhota Bheem campaign, and I'm going to dive straight into it. Tell us your thought process behind choosing Chhota Bheem, and why did you think this was the right strategy to keep Indians interested in Singapore?
Ritvika, as you have rightly stated, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a huge reset button in many ways across governments, across countries, across various economic sectors. For the Singapore tourism, this has never been seen before in our 57 years of history of running the tourism promotions for the country. So when we were looking at Singapore tourism in India, and India is a very important source market for Singapore. In 2019, before COVID hit us, in 2019, India was our third largest source market, and India contributed 1.41 million visitors to Singapore. So it is hugely important for us to stay engaged in the market, connect with our consumers, connect with our audiences. So we have been doing a lot of virtual hybrid events over the last 1.5 years to keep consumers engaged. And early this year, we thought it is important that we connect with the children across India. What started off as a project between Singapore Tourism Board, and we were very lucky to have Wood Kids app on board as a partner, and Green Gold Animations, the creators of Chhota Bheem. In fact, Chhota Bheem has been a project of intent for us for a few years now. I mean, he's a very positive character, a lot of fun, a lot of energy, a lot of entertainment, and he connects with children very well. So the idea for the entire project was connecting with the children across India during this pandemic period, bring them some cheer, some fun, and let them enjoy an escapade to Singapore. So we positioned it as a gift of smiles to the Indian children across all over the cities. We did it in 3 languages, Hindi, Tamil and English. And the idea was to present 7 episodes, Chhota Bheem and friends having a variety of experiences in Singapore. So essentially, it was presenting a gift of smiles to the children who are across India, studying at home or being cooped up because of the pandemic restrictions in place.
So, like you said, the campaign is interesting because it targets Indian children. Why is this an important market for STB?
The family audience segment is an important market as a segment for Singapore. The Indian families, when they travel to Singapore with their children, they are hugely important to the various attractions in Singapore. So whether it is the zoo, the bird park, Gardens by the Bay, Sentosa, Resorts World Sentosa, and so on and so forth, all the various attractions count the Indian family traveler as among their top 3 to 5 key source market. And the families, when they come to Singapore, they enjoy various experiences in Singapore. So apart from the attractions, they go, they are doing dining, they stay in good hotels. So it is an important segment for us to continue engaging. And the family segment is also a segment which Singapore tourism for the last 2.5 decades in India have been cultivating very fervently. So for us, it was important, even during this pandemic period, how do we bring Singapore close to the hearts and minds of the family audiences and keep Singapore in their mindsets. So when the travel restarts eventually, the family audiences will consider Singapore again as a top choice destination for their travel.
So, given the circumstances and with tourism being a far-fetched idea even today, what does STB want to achieve from this initiative, both in the short run and in the long run?
For us, it is important that as a destination, Singapore is in the mindsets and hearts of the Indian travelers. What we are looking at it is a few objectives in mind. Point number one is to present Singapore and update the Indian audiences what's happening in Singapore, what kind of measures are being taken. So, for example, we have a Singapore Clean initiative, which is to certify premises across Singapore which are meeting to the standards of COVID-19 protocols and safety protocols. And to date, we have certified about 31,000 establishments as Singapore Clean. So this is an example of what information that's coming out of Singapore that we need to present to the Indian audiences. So that's one, presenting Singapore and updates about Singapore. Two, there are various initiatives that we want to present Singapore's destination experiences virtually. Chhota Bheem is, of course, one example that we have cited. But we have also done, for example, with the travel trade in India, who are a very important bridge between us and the consumers. We have presented to them Singapore virtually. So we have done recently a familiarization trip of the various tours, experiences available in Singapore. So they did a zoo tour virtually. We also had Brass Lion Distillery doing a concoction of gin making through virtual experience as well. And it was hybrid. So they actually were in their comforts of home doing the gin as the tour guide in Singapore was bringing them through the experience. So it is important to present Singapore's experiences to the audiences virtually as they stay in India with the borders being closed. I think finally the third point is it is making sure that our connections and conversations continue. We are in the business of providing human experiences, and it's a very high touch industry. You need to present the various experiences, make sure that the connections with the audiences are there and conversations are still happening. So whether it is a food event, presenting the zoo experience or presenting Sentosa experience, we feel that it is important that conversations continue and communications with the audiences continue. And therefore, eventually, when travel restarts, the Indian audiences will feel comfortable that they know enough about what's happening in Singapore for them to come visit us again.
Well, this is your second show on Woot. Tell us a little bit about this content partnership you have with Woot and how has this helped you achieve your objectives and also reach the target market?
So actually, I need to zoom out a bit, Rithika. So Chhota Bheem, the content partnership with Woot Kids was one among quite a few partnerships that we have done. So I'll just go back to about March, April 2020 when COVID hit us and in India and the borders were shut. So we took a pause until about middle of last year. We didn't do any consumer engagement because all of us were grappling with how do you manage this COVID and what's going to happen. But very early on, we realized that we needed to reconnect with the Indian audiences and present Singapore. So we did with Zomato. At that point in time, we had a 10-city on-ground activation called Zomaland. And with Zomato, we were presenting Singapore's food in their Zomaland festivals across various cities in India. And when COVID hit us, we worked with Zomato to make it into a virtual event. So Zomaland at Home was one of the partnerships that we had. And then we had worked with National Geographic, Book My Show to present video content of experiences in Singapore. And we used Singapore talent as well as an Indian talent, and they talk about their passion points. And through that, we were presenting Singapore through the eyes of this passionistas or the influencers. So in that string of activities, we were then looking at what kind of partnership will bring us close to the family audiences. And that's where Chhota Bheem project was looked at, and we developed that idea. I think the journey was interesting. In any partnership, we look for like-minded, strategically aligned partners. And in Woot Kids as well as Green Gold Animations, we were very fortunate to have the collaborators think alike about presenting very high quality content, very entertaining content, presented in a way which was entertaining but also informative. So it was, for example, the episodes did show various experiences in Singapore, but it also presented ideas about how the hawker culture in Singapore is UNESCO listed. We presented Dancing in Unison, which was a art wall in Little India, collaboration between an Indian artist and a Singaporean artist. And these were information bits for the children to be both entertained and educated or informed about such happenings and activities. So overall, it was in a series of content partnerships, and Chhota Bheem fitted in well to connect with the family audiences, which was one important element for that project.
Mr. Srithar, now I want to talk about the travel industry at large. There's been a drastic shift in consumer attitude towards travel and tourism. According to you, what are some of these change priorities, and what do you think are some of these changes that are going to be permanent, and which ones are going to be like maybe short term, and which one are long term?
Well, it is going to be a very different environment when people do start traveling again in big numbers, and we do not even know when this travel in big numbers is going to be. Is it a couple of years, or is it going to be slightly longer? But a few things are coming to bear upon us. Number one, safety concerns are going to be such overriding concerns when people start traveling. So they're going to think about what are the safety protocols in place, what kind of vaccinations are needed, what kind of safety protocols and demands have been put in place in the destinations, and how, as a consumer, as a traveler, how comfortable am I traveling to that particular destination? So safety and all that is related to it, vaccinations, insurance, travel costs, all of that will come into focus for a lot of the travelers. So that's one. Two, I think technology is going to be hugely important. Already we are looking at going digital, going contactless. People are now very uncomfortable touching surfaces, for example, and sanitization and masks are in place. So technology is going to be so important. I mean, even as you move around, you want to be quite comfortable that a lot of your activities are as contactless as possible. And how do you enable technology to make your experiences as wholesome, as fun-filled as possible, but at the same time safe? So the technology is going to be number two, a very important factor. I think number three, it's going to be how travel itself may change. For at least for the immediate future, people are probably going to be traveling in smaller groups. They are going to perhaps travel in small family segments or friends whom they are comfortable with. They will customize their holidays. They will probably look at a bit more outdoors, because there's a sense of if you're in outdoors and if you're masked up, chances of being infected and all is a bit lower. So the traveler may go in smaller groups, customize his itinerary, be very focused, and maybe all this country hopping, multi-destination travel may also take a while to pick up again, because previously traveling between borders is going to be very easy, but now it is going to be, oh, I need to figure out what is the change in restrictions between a country to country. And then the other thing is, if I want to go into a particular country and there's a lot of planning to be done, do I then stay put in that particular country and enjoy the destination longer? So these are some of the things that will come into focus when travelers restart and going about planning their holidays.
The crisis has also altered the way brands communicate with their consumers, especially in the travel industry. How do you think brands in this business need to communicate with consumers today in order to rebuild trust and confidence in travel again?
Singapore Tourism Board, I think the intent all along has been to be clear, to be as factual as possible, and communicate our messages in a way that is focused on the audiences, right? So I think that has given us a lot of credibility. So as we speak, the brand affinity in India for Singapore is very high. A lot of Indian travelers and audiences feel very comfortable with the Singapore brand. They trust it. They know that we are very open. So Singapore was among the very first few countries to come out openly and declare, and I'm bringing you back to about March, April last year, or maybe even February. The very first case of COVID-19 hit Singapore in January. And very soon after that, from February and all, we were putting out a lot of content on what the infection situation is in Singapore, what kind of measures are being placed. So we have always been very clear that we need to communicate as factually and as accurately possible, providing information which is relevant to our audiences. So the credibility is a very high agenda item for many brands like Singapore. And of course, there are many brands who look at that as a very important criteria in their communications with the audiences. So that's one, building brand affinity and credibility. Two, I think for Singapore tourism, we have also be very mindful that our communications has to be empathetic. And empathetic means that understand that the audiences, I mean, all of us, it is not just audiences, right? Even as businesses, all of us have going through quite tough times. And from an audience perspective, there are also very tough situations that they are facing and hardships. So we were very clear and careful in our communications, and wherever possible, we wanted to be empathetic in our communications. And finally, the third thing is authentic connections. I think the audiences today have been consuming so much content over the various platforms, digital platforms, and platforms like yours as well. They are very, very well informed, more well informed than even before, right? So therefore, it is going to be very important that you be authentic in your communications. I think marketing, overselling, overpromising, I think it is going to be a bit difficult because the audiences are very discerning. And we are therefore very clear for Singapore tourism that our communications has to be authentic. We use as much as possible true voices, whether it is in Singapore or whether it is influencers in India. True voices, people who have actually experienced Singapore, people who actually have a viewpoint about Singapore, and we use those voices to communicate. So authentic communications is going to be important.
You know, Singapore is also a major business hub, but it seems like corporate travel is going to be one of the last few segments to find its feet. So what advice would you have for businesses and their travel partners in this particular area?
For Singapore, we have been very clear that we are going to take a very cautious, deliberate approach to borders reopening, and safety of Singaporeans, residents is going to be very important. As I speak today, more than 80% of Singaporeans and residents have been vaccinated in Singapore. And that is a threshold that the Singapore government has been looking at, and that will enable us to slowly but surely open up our borders. So we have adopted a mindset that we need to trace, test, and vaccinate, right? So it is important that we have all that safety protocols in place, and when travelers come, they are comfortable that Singapore is relatively in a position where they are taking all the necessary safety protocols. And we have been recognized for putting in place many of these safety protocols by various independent bodies. So that's one. But having said that, you are right in saying that Singapore is a major aviation hub, and it is important for us that our borders start reopening, but it is going to be cautious and deliberate. We have, for example, we have recently announced a vaccinated green lane arrangement with Germany, and as we start opening up borders, learning from how these arrangements work, we will slowly open up to other countries. So for the business and corporate travel from India into Singapore, we know that there's a lot of interest of coming into Singapore. We are hopeful that as situation improves and vaccinations and infection controls are in place in many more countries across the globe, this will pick up. So for now, our task is to stay engaged with our corporate audiences, stay engaged with our meetings and incentive group intermediaries, which we are doing, and keep them informed of what's happening in Singapore. And when the time is right, we will welcome them back to Singapore.
Domestic tourism is also on the rise globally. Do you think this is also one of the trends that's here to stay?
I think as the situation improves, one of the things we will realize is domestic tourism will be a big beneficiary of this COVID, right? For at least for the next few years, it is obvious that travelers are going to be a lot more comfortable just traveling within their own country, because it is safer. A lot more restrictions are not going to be very hard on the travelers, so it is easier for them to do domestic travel. They can plan, and they can move around the country. So domestic tourism is going to be very important, and we recognize that. And I do believe that it is going to be, for the next few years, going to be very important. And the other plus point is, once domestic tourism picks up, and countries have put in place various facilities and measures to promote domestic tourism, whether it's flight connections, infrastructure development, experiences are better, I'm sure a lot of the audiences within the country are going to be taken up with domestic tourism. Having said that, international travel, overseas travel, that is going to be such an important endeavor for humans, right? I mean, we want to go and see other cultures, taste other food, experience the vibe of a particular place or the events of that place. So I do believe that as more and more people get comfortable with domestic travel and domestic tourism, they will also then be more open to international tourism. So I do believe that domestic tourism, if they start enjoying their country, will lead them to say, okay, now I'm comfortable traveling and I know how to manage myself. They will then look at overseas travel, and they will start traveling to probably countries in their immediate flying circle. So whether it's a 300, so for example, Singapore and Southeast Asian countries will benefit in that sense. We are within a 3.5 to 5.5 hour flying radius. So short haul destinations out of India will benefit in the short term. And then, of course, eventually, when people are a lot more comfortable, overseas travel will then pick up again.
Right. Are there any other trends that you're looking at as areas of opportunities for tourism in the near future?
Any other trends? Interesting question. I think one of the big trend that all of us will be looking at is this conscious travel, or travel with sustainability and environment friendliness in mind. I think COVID has taught all of us a huge lesson, right? That we do impact the environment, and a lot of travelers or a lot of consumers have started asking this question of what is the human impact on environment and what's happening around the world in terms of weather. That's going to be on the minds of travelers, and the younger traveler is going to be even more concerned about this. And for India, with about 67% under the age of 35, is going to be a concern that a lot of travelers from India will be looking at. How it is going to impact immediate purchase decisions has to be waited, and we have to wait and see. But this conscious travel, being able to make sure that our bio footprint is not as high, and we are looking at our travel in a way that it is environmental friendly if possible, or we are conscious about the impact that we are having on the environment. I think that travel will pick up, and more people may ask in their travel choices and decisions, how is this part of my conscious travel focus? So that's one trend that's likely to come up.
There's been a lot of discussion about the new normal in the travel industry. It's not going to be the same anymore. What do you think are some of the traps that brands can fall into, if they continue to think in the old way? In other words, what are some of the do's and don'ts, of this new normal in the travel industry for brands?
One important point is going back to how it was in 2019, for example. I don't think that's going to happen, at least not for the next few years. If the travel trade fraternity is looking at it, and a lot of discussions have taken place on this, they are quite aware that how it was in 2019 is not going to return so soon, right? And one of the important points for us to note is that we doing it alone, we can, for example, a travel agent just have to focus on what he or she is delivering to the audiences, and that's all. I think that kind of mindset has to change. So I have started calling this in my little space of interactions with all my travel trade fraternity, I've said, look, previously you were sitting in your home and you are very comfortable that when somebody knocks on your door, you open the door and you invite that traveler or that guest in, and you show him your living room, you show him your bedroom, and so on and so forth. So that was enough, right? Because you just had to know what was happening in your home. No longer. You need to know what's happening in your neighborhood. Because what's going to happen is you need to know, where is that taxi coming from? How is it entering your street? Which street has that taxi gone in? And how is that particular guest coming and ending up in your home? And this then means whether it's a travel agent, airlines, hotels, attractions, a tourism body, all of us have to have a neighborhood feel. We need to know what's happening on each other's space so that we can properly guide the guest. Because the guest, the traveler, has got a lot of things going on. He has to plan many things, right? There's a lot of contingencies he has to think of. So increasingly, it is going to be coming out of this one important point, and I hope it's something that many of us realize. We need to cooperate more. We need to collaborate more. We need to integrate more. And therefore, then the guest will have the comfort that, yeah, there's many things interwoven, and I'm going to have a good experience in that particular country or in that particular destination. So it is going to be I'm hoping it is going to be a very collaborative space that we are going to enter into in the travel fraternity.
My final question to you, as a marketer, what have been your biggest learnings during this time?
Getting back to basics has been my biggest learning. Over the years, as brands, I think all of us businesses as brands, we go and look at how do we best connect, how do we best market our destination or best market our product. We look at numbers, we look at the value chain, the various partners. So all of that is still very relevant. But I think this reset button has made us pause and ask ourselves fundamental questions again, right? So what is the experience that the traveler is willing to travel for? What is the structure that we need to put in place? The comfort that we need to be able to communicate? What is the authentic communication that the consumer or the traveler wants? Because it is no longer enough to say, oh, we are a fantastic destination, come over. No. The consumer wants basic facts. The consumer wants information. The consumer wants factual, accurate, in-time, real-time communication. So I think getting back to basics, all of us have to look at the consumer and look at the audiences we are talking to and say, how do we reconnect with this audience who has been completely blown over? All of us have been blown over by this pandemic. So when we start communicating, and I mean, we have started communicating with our audiences. And one of the things we have realized is we need to be very authentic in our communication. So yeah, so authentic, clear, empathetic communications and engagement with the audience is something that has been learned over this past 1.5 years.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Srithar. That was insightful. Thank you.
Thank you, Rithvika. Thank you very much for your questions. It was pretty interesting questions, and I hope the audiences have some takeaway from these answers. Thank you very much.
And that was GB Srithar sharing the importance of clear and authentic communication during this time. He is now presenting the Melt cheat sheet. Travel in the new normal will focus on safety, technology, and customized itinerary. Brands in the travel sector need to put out factual, empathetic, and authentic communication. Businesses in the travel industry need to cooperate, collaborate, and integrate in the new normal. And that's a wrap on this episode of Melt. You can follow us on social media. Our handle is Ready to Melt, and stay updated with all that's happening in the world of advertising and marketing with our daily Melt update on our website, readytomelt.com. I shall see you next week, same time, same place. Goodbye.